On July 6, 1966, 52 American prisoners of war in North Vietnam were pulled from their cells inside a notorious prison called the Hanoi Hilton. They were about to perform in the communist propaganda spectacle, the so-called Hanoi March. In front of cameras, the POWs were paraded through the city. The North Vietnamese leaders meant to show them off as war criminals to cheering citizens. Instead, the march quickly turned into a violent mob attack. Crowds hurled bricks, bottles, and fists at the Americans. Guards tried to hold the line but lost control as the mob surged forward, striking prisoners and even the guards themselves. For hours, the chained men fought to stay on their feet, dodging blows and debris until they were finally herded back to their cells. The film of the march reached the world within days, shocking the American public. Outrage swept the nation, igniting demands for action. What followed was a campaign that would culminate in one of the most daring actions of American Special Forces, and at the same time, one of the most controversial operations in the Vietnam War, Operation Ivory Coast. Locating the POWs. Even before the public put pressure on them, the Pentagon worked hard to locate American prisoners of war captured behind enemy lines. Intelligence teams used whatever info they could get their hands on, aerial surveillance, captured enemy reports, and human sources to locate sites where POWs were held. In September 1967, the Defense Intelligence Agency received information about a possible prisoner camp near the town of Son Tay, roughly 30 miles west of Hanoi. MACV SOG investigated the site in 1968 but could not obtain confirmation strong enough to justify action. Over time, information about the camp kept coming in from different sources. In February 1970, a captured North Vietnamese soldier told U.S. interrogators he had worked as a cook at the Son Tay camp. He described 2 long rows of buildings, each holding 40 to 50 prisoners. Although the level of detail he provided seemed exaggerated, the physical description matched what analysts could see in photos. It was enough for specialists at the 1127th Field Activities Group to further examine reconnaissance photographs. On April 1, 1970, the Defense Intelligence Agency confirmed the camp was active, estimating up to 55 American prisoners inside. The CIA supported these findings, noting signs of expansion in nearby construction. By May 1970, intelligence officers were confident Son Tay was a real POW camp. It was a call sign for senior military leaders to begin considering a rescue plan. Polar Circle. The Army's first plan to rescue the prisoners was called Polar Circle. It began as a study to see if such a mission was possible. At first, they considered sending a small team near Mont Bavi to confirm prisoner presence and rescue a few men. The idea was dropped. It risked alerting the enemy and would make a larger rescue later unlikely. The second option was to launch a rescue operation from CIA sites in Laos, which were close enough to Son Tay. This option was rejected as well because North Vietnamese agents in Laos could spot the preparations. Ultimately, planners decided that Thailand was the best choice, though it meant longer flights and complicated night refueling. Different assault methods were tested, from parachute drops to landing jeeps. After much consideration, it was decided that the most effective way was to land one helicopter inside the compound while others landed nearby to attack from multiple sides. The White House gave the green light for the operation. They saw the rescue as more than a military mission. If successful, it could take away from Hanoi's main bargaining chip in peace talks and improve the treatment of all prisoners. It could also boost morale among U.S. forces and the American public. Operation codenamed Ivory Coast was set in motion. Now, the question was who would be crazy enough to lead such an operation into the heart of enemy territory? Operation Ivory Coast. The task of leading the ground force went to Colonel Arthur Bull Simons, a 52-year-old career soldier with long experience in special ops. During World War II, he took part in the famous January 1945 raid on Cabanatuan in the Philippines, which freed more than 500 prisoners from a Japanese camp. In the early 1960s, he trained Laotian troops for covert missions and led dangerous raids into North Vietnam with MACV SOG. Simons had a reputation for toughness, decisive leadership, and success under extreme conditions. He was the kind of man who would walk straight into a hornet's nest if the mission demanded it. When approached about leading a secret and dangerous operation, Simons did not hesitate. Without knowing all the details, he immediately agreed. His first task was to build and train a hand-picked rescue team. Recruitment was done quietly using trusted networks within the Special Forces. Volunteers were told it would be hazardous duty with no extra pay. Many applied, but only the best were chosen. Volunteers were told only that it would be a dangerous mission with no extra pay. Many applied, but only those with the best records, physical fitness, and mental toughness were considered. For training, the mission needed a secure and well-equipped site. Fort Bragg was the first choice, but its facilities were too exposed. Eglin Air Force Base in Florida was selected instead, as it offered large isolated training areas and an airfield. Mission secrecy was of the utmost importance. During the entire training course, the team was under constant guard. Simons created a detailed mock-up of the Son Tay prison camp in the base, but building a full-scale model carried a risk of being spotted by Soviet satellites. To hide the target's shape, engineers used 1,500 yards of white target cloth in wooden frames to outline walls and buildings. It gave the men a full-size layout to rehearse without revealing the real mission to outside observers. The training was extremely intense, with a focus on night operations. The team practiced marksmanship daily, refining their shooting for close-quarters fighting at night. They trained with night vision devices, practiced silent movement, and fired weapons under low light. They learned to work with helicopters in darkness, fast and low, and to fight from aircraft doors during landings. Room-clearing drills were repeated until they were automatic. The men knew the camp's layout so well they could move through without hesitation. Live-fire exercises simulated clearing cell blocks and guard positions without harming prisoners. Each man learned his role and the roles of others so they could adapt if anyone went down. At the same time, air training focused on flying fast, low, and in tight formation at night. HH-53 helicopter crews practiced leading through hilly terrain at low altitudes, often just above the trees. Their most complex task was the night refueling. Pilots had to learn to coordinate speed and altitude with HC-130 tankers in blackout conditions. In such procedures, any mistake could break contact with or damage the refueling equipment. Nothing was left to chance. The planners accounted for every possible detail. The nature of the operation called for the team to be equipped with specialized gear, much of it not standard issue. Civilian 12-gauge shotguns were bought because they performed better than military versions. Colt provided 30-round magazines for M16 and CAR-15 rifles, though these required special carrying methods. The Army bought civilian single-point red dot sights to allow fast, accurate shooting in the dark. Because it was estimated that the prisoners were malnourished and in poor health, special kits were prepared with treatments for malaria, malnutrition, and all sorts of injuries. Special high-calorie food, including baby food rice, was packed in sealed containers for quick feeding of weakened prisoners. They also packed lightweight sneakers with padded insoles for POWs to wear during evacuation. Everything was set for what was supposed to be a flawless operation. Operation Kingpin. The assault plan was divided into 3 ground force elements: Blue Boy, Red Wine, and Greenleaf. Blue Boy was the lead assault team. It was commanded by Captain Richard Dick Meadows, a battle-hardened MAC-V SOG expert. Blue Boy would ride in an HH-3E Jolly Green helicopter, call sign Banana. Its pilot would crash land inside the prison courtyard to achieve total surprise. As soon as the helicopter stopped, the men would pour out, using bullhorns to tell prisoners to stay down. They would then move directly to the cell blocks, killing any guards in the way. Each team was assigned to build into open cells and free the prisoners. Once the prisoners were located, Blue Boy would move them to a hole blown in the south wall for evacuation. As a support to their action, an HH-53C Super Jolly gunship Apple III was tasked with destroying the north and east towers. Red Wine Force, led by Lieutenant Colonel Elliot Sindor, would arrive in another HH-53 Apple II and land outside the south wall. They would move toward the camp and link up with Blue Boy inside. Red Wine's security elements would clear the buildings south and east of the main compound and block enemy movement toward the camp. They would also prepare landing zones for helicopters Apple IV and V to pick up the prisoners. Greenleaf Force, led by Colonel Simons himself, would land from HH-53 Apple I east of the camp. Their first task was to destroy the bridge off the Songkhon River to stop reinforcements from reaching the camp. They would also cut power and communication lines, clear buildings to the northeast wall, and guard approaches from that direction. All three elements would operate in sequence, moving freed prisoners to the evacuation points, securing the camp, and withdrawing before large enemy forces could respond. As a cover for the operation, the U.S. Navy staged a large diversion from carriers in the Gulf of Tonkin, known as the Tonkin Gulf Yacht Club. 3 carriers, USS Oriskany, USS Ranger, and USS Hancock, were planned to launch more than 100 aircraft on combat missions and air patrols. The size and timing of the strike would force North Vietnamese radar and air defenses to focus eastward. SAMs would be fired toward the diversion, while the real rescue force flew in from the west, low and undetected. By early November 1970, the force was ready. An advance group went to Thailand to prepare staging bases. The main body flew to Tak Lee Royal Thai Air Force Base with the helicopters and crews at the base at Udorn. The men were briefed on flight routes, weather, and survival procedures, but most still did not know the exact target. The raid was planned for November 22nd, but because of the incoming typhoon, it was advanced 24 hours. On November 20th, Brigadier General Leroy J. Manor, in overall command of the mission, gave the launch order. That night, the team of 56 raiders boarded the helicopters and took off. Over Laos, the helicopters refueled and moved toward their target under the cover of night. They hadn't the slightest idea of what was waiting for them. The raid. The helicopters entered the North Vietnamese airspace, led by 2 MC-130 Combat Talons and A-1 Sky Raiders. As they approached the target, they dropped to a treetop height to avoid radar. At 02:18 on November 21st, the MC-130s transmitted the execute command Alpha, Alpha, Alpha to all aircraft as they flew over the prison, releasing 4 illumination flares and 2 battle simulators. The raid had begun. As the raid force neared the target area, a single mistake threatened to ruin the operation before it even began. Apple III's pilot, leading the helicopter formation, spotted a compound almost identical to the prison camp and veered towards it. Others followed. However, as he approached the compound, he noticed it was not a prison camp but troop barracks, designated secondary school. The prison camp was further to the north. Recognizing his mistake, Apple III's pilot changed the course and moved toward the original camp. Yet Banana was already preparing to land. As it descended, raiders aboard the Banana opened fire from all holes on the helicopter. Luckily, before he crash-landed the helicopter, the pilot noticed that this was not the prison yard. He applied full power and lifted the helicopter in the direction of the actual target, the Son Tay prison. Unfortunately, the Apple I crew, seeing the Banana opening fire, landed south of the secondary school and began disembarking the Greenleaf team. The raiders were welcomed by heavy fire as the enemy force in the barracks was alerted by the fire from Banana. Colonel Sions immediately recognized the mistake that was made and organized a fighting withdrawal. Under fire, the Greenleaf reboarded Apple I and flew off. Further north, the HH-3E Banana carrying the Blue Boy team had reached the prison compound. The helicopter popped over the outer wall and dove straight into the small courtyard inside the prison compound. The Banana slammed into the ground, clipping small trees and scattering debris. Before the rotors had fully stopped, Captain Dick Meadows was out the door, shouting into a bullhorn, "We're American, keep your heads down." The team spread out instantly, each man moving to his assigned target. Inside the cell blocks, the air was hot and still. The men swept through each narrow corridor, rifles up, calling for any prisoners to show themselves. However, they found nothing but empty bunks and trash. There were no prisoners. Meadows moved quickly between buildings, directing the search. He personally checked the smaller isolation cells. Again, nothing. He radioed Lieutenant Colonel Sindor, whose Red Wine team had already landed outside the prison walls and cleared the area of enemy presence. Negative items. Repeat, negative items. The raid force was struck by a shocking realization. The camp was empty. The intelligence failed. There wasn't a single POW in the camp. Despite the shock, the raiders continued with the plan. The Blue Boy team cleared all structures to ensure no defenders were hiding. They set security on the north and east walls and prepared an opening in the south wall for evacuation. Demolition charges were set on the wrecked helicopter, ensuring it didn't fall into enemy hands. For the next several minutes, Blue Boy held the camp, watching for signs of counterattack. In the meantime, Greenleaf, after recovering from the mistaken landing, reached its proper position east of the camp. They destroyed a bridge over the Songkhan River with explosives, cut power and communication lines, and secured the eastern approaches. With the mission complete, Simons ordered extraction. The HH-53s returned from holding positions to the landing zones. Blue Boy boarded Apple 1 along with Banana's crew. Red wide-loaded to Apple 2. The teams covered each other as they withdrew, firing at enemy troops and vehicles approaching the camp. As the helicopters lifted off, enemy fire followed them. The pilots flew low and fast, weaving to avoid anti-aircraft fire. The A-1s fired rockets into ridgelines to suppress enemy gunners. The rescue force regrouped over Laos for the flight back to Thailand. By mid-morning on November 21, 1970, all raiders were back on friendly bases. Every man who went in returned alive. The camp at Son Tay lay empty behind them, yet no prisoner was saved. The aftermath. When the raiders returned to base, they were overcome with deep disappointment. Months of preparation, flawless execution, and high personal risk had led them only to an empty camp. How come no one noticed this? Well, they actually did. In the days before the raid, several warnings suggested Son Tay might already be empty. A North Vietnamese force smuggled out a list of known POW camps in a cigarette packet, and Son Tay was missing. A small special forces team with a CIA operative was sent near the target to check on the info. They confirmed the layout but could not see inside the high walls or find POW work details outside. The absence of visible prisoners raised concerns, but no firm conclusion was drawn. On November 20th, analysts reviewed another intel, a letter from a POW stating that the POWs had been moving from Tay Son in mid-July. Henry Kissinger later confirmed he saw this message but judged it too weak to cancel the operation. The phrase "camp closed" was assumed to mean locked down, not abandoned. Shortly before launch, the Defense Intelligence Agency told Admiral Moorer and Secretary Laird that most or all the prisoners had probably been moved. This warning never reached the rest of the Joint Chiefs or President Nixon, and the mission went ahead. Why the prisoners had been moved from Son Tay remains uncertain. Some believe seasonal flooding forced the relocation. Others thought prisoners were shifted to separate religious groups or for security reasons after escape attempts elsewhere. Some argued it was a pure coincidence, yet the fact caused a fierce debate back home in the States. Many in Congress praised the bravery of the force but questioned how such a mission could be launched on outdated intelligence. Some accused the administration of using the raid for political gain, suggesting it was time to influence peace talks in Paris. Others saw it as a sign of intelligence breakdown, pointing to reports that might have shown the camp was empty months earlier. President Richard Nixon, however, publicly supported the raiders. He called the operation a daring and skillful display of American capability. Many participants received high awards, including Distinguished Service Crosses, Silver Stars, and many other decorations. As it turned out, the operation was not a complete failure as it seemed. Years later, reports from returning POWs indicated that the raid had lifted their morale. Word of the attempt reached Hanoi's prisoners, reassuring them that they had not been forgotten. Overall, the raid on Son Tay was seen as a tactical success but an intelligence failure. The planning and execution were nearly flawless. The air and ground forces worked together with perfect timing, flying deep into enemy territory at night, striking with surprise and withdrawing without losing a man to enemy action. The main weakness was the intelligence process. Information about the camp's status was not fully shared between agencies. Reports suggesting the prisoners might have been moved were not acted on quickly enough. By the time the force struck, the camp had been empty for months. Despite the disappointment, the raid had important effects. It demonstrated the reach and skill of U.S. Special Forces and sent a clear message across the armed forces. No man is ever left behind. Thank you for watching this episode. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up and share it. Don't forget to subscribe to the Militology channel for more. Stay tuned.